like to welcome you to this video training presentation on church conflict. I'm Russell Seay. I am on the faculty of Oakwood University in the School of Religion. Before coming here in 2010, I served 30 years as a pastor and as a conference departmental leader. And part of my responsibility in the conference office was to serve local churches as the ministerial director, and as such I had to mediate conflicts that may occur between pastors and the church, or general conflict in the church. So I want to share with you some basic insights that may help you to resolve conflicts, not just simply manage conflicts, but actually resolve them. If you are not experiencing any conflicts, great. But if you just keep on existing, you will. So this presentation can help you to be able to avoid having conflicts in the first place, or as they begin to develop, to be able to deal with them before those conflicts create worse damage. So there are basically two things that we would like for you to leave away with, and that is an understanding of the sources of conflict, and to be able to identify the sources of conflict, and then in turn apply the appropriate remedy to the conflict based on those sources, to understand the nature of conflict, so that you don't overreact or underreact in certain situations. And then the second thing that we want to do is to share with you a basic relational strategy for resolving most church conflicts. Now, when you come to a conflict, you usually are going to carry two buckets with you. That is to say, metaphorical two buckets. And the outcome is going to depend upon which bucket you throw on the fire or the amber that is smoldering. One bucket has water in it, and the other one has gasoline. But you have the choice as to which one you will use, and therefore which one will affect the outcome. Now, what exactly is conflict? Conflict, the definition of conflict is simply to be incompatible or at variance or having a clash with. That conflict is defined as a serious disagreement or argument, and especially one over a long period of time. There are a number of synonyms, and you can pick whichever one that sounds right for your particular situation: an argument, a squabble, a dispute, a disagreement. There are many synonyms for what we call a conflict. Now, the first thing that we need to understand about conflicts is that conflicts are inevitable, that you can't live in this world without encountering or having some kind of conflict. Now, even though we're talking primarily about conflicts within the church, but what we're talking about will also have applications in your home, on your job, in the community. Wherever there are more than one individual, you're going to have conflict. And sometimes you're going to have conflicts when there's only one individual. I mean, you've used the expression, I've heard persons use the expression, I'm conflicted. But conflicts are inevitable because all humans are limited in their understanding. That is to say, we don't know everything about everything, and as we are going to identify, one of the sources of conflict comes out of misunderstanding. Number two, conflicts are inevitable because all humans have areas of insecurity in their lives. And oftentimes we lash out or we become defensive because, not only because of misunderstanding, but because of our own insecurities. And number three, conflicts occur because are inevitable. They are inevitable because all humans are self-interested. That is to say, we're selfish. We are looking out for our interests, and unfortunately, we oftentimes believe that if one person wins, the other person must lose. And therefore, we don't want to be the one on the losing end. The other important thing about conflict, I mean, to understand that conflicts are inevitable is important. To understand that point is important so that you're not spending your life trying to avoid conflict. If you already know that conflicts are inevitable, then you expect conflicts to occur, and when conflicts occur, your world doesn't fall apart because of your disappointment. And with that in mind, you then are able to evaluate the conflicts because all conflicts are not equal. First of all, they're not equal in consequence. That is to say that I can have a disagreement with someone, and because of that disagreement, the consequence is not going to always be the same. Some consequences are going to be devastating, while other consequences may just simply be inconveniences. But conflicts are not equal in scope. That is to say, every disagreement, every squabble does not have to include the entire world or everybody around. That is to say, that conflict does not have to naturally and inevitably include a large group. Matter of fact, that's why Jesus says that if you have aught against your brother or your brother has aught against you, that you go to them. Don't go to the church first. Go to them. Don't go to the pastor first. Go to them so that you can contain the scope of the conflict. So now that we kind of understand a little something about the nature of conflict, the issue is, what are the sources or the causes of most conflict? And I want to suggest that most conflicts occur from four basic causes. Now, there are others, or there are other shades of the four that I'm going to share with you. But if you can remember these four, And when there is a conflict, you try to understand, is the cause of this disagreement because of one of these four, and sometimes it's a combination of them. But the first one I like to suggest, and I've already hinted at it, and that is conflict occurs when there is a misunderstanding. That is to say, when a person perhaps misinterprets what has been said, a person may not have all of the facts, all of the information, and because of that may get a distorted perception of what's going on, or may come to the wrong conclusion. And they jump to a conclusion and react and respond based on that conclusion. The second cause of conflict is when boundaries have been transgressed. In other words, when somebody gets out of their lane. It's like when you're driving down the street. That's why when you're driving, there are lanes, and those lanes are delineated by lines or dashes. And sometimes you have two lines down the street. That means something different than when you have one line on one, a solid line on one side and the dash lines on the other side. It has a different meaning, that when you have a white line, it means one thing. When the white line is solid, it means one thing. And when it's dashed, it means another. As long as people respond to the lanes, the boundaries that have been established, and drive accordingly, you can cut down an awful lot of wrecks and fatalities. And the same is in any organization, whether it's a home organization, whether it's a marriage organization, and especially as a church organization. When people understand clearly what the boundaries, what their lanes are, and try to live within those, conflict can be minimized. The third cause of conflict is when expectations aren't met. Now, again, as I said, there might be a combination of things that you might end up with the wrong expectations because of a misunderstanding. But at any rate, or you may have had a proper understanding and the person just did not do what they said that they were going to do or what they were expected to do. Oftentimes, conflict occurs because of that. And then number 4, conflicts often occurs when relational, emotional needs are not met. And we will list for you those emotional relational needs. And along with this presentation, there will be some handouts that you can take a closer look and a deeper look at what those emotional relational needs are. But the point here is that conflict occurs. When conflict occurs, it is not the surface issue oftentimes that is the cause of the conflict. It oftentimes is because of these underlying issues, because there was a misunderstanding, because boundaries were transgressed, because expectations weren't met, or because needs, emotional relational needs, were not met. So that when you are dealing with conflicts, it then becomes very important to identify the cause, because the cause will guide you to the remedy. Now, I would like to just list some emotional relational needs, because this is a big reason for conflicts, and this is one of those areas that it is very difficult for people to even admit that there is a problem. And these emotional relational needs look like this: attention, or approval. Someone does something and they don't get the proper recognition because they need approval, or appreciation, or affection. That other relational needs are comfort and acceptance, respect, encouragement, support, and security. Now, emotional relational needs are oftentimes difficult for a person to admit. That is to say, a person does not get an opportunity to sing. And all of a sudden, one parent may feel that their child isn't getting an opportunity to use their gifts and talents, while another one is always up front. Well, it's kind of hard sometimes to say, I need some approval, and I want some approval that comes by way of my child shining. Unable to communicate in those clear terms, the person began looking at other problems and other issues to deal with. So it's very, very important that you identify the source and the cause of conflict. Now, I want to make two additional observations with respect to conflict. The first one is probably, you would say, well, that goes without saying. And that is that there are negative aspects of conflict. But it's important to understand what those negative aspects of conflict is. And that is that, first of all, conflicts are very distracting. That the time that you spend dealing with the conflict is time that is taking the church away from its primary mission and purpose. Second is that conflict will use emotional resources unproductively. And it's the emotional resources that gets us moving and going and acting. And if we're using those emotional resources to defend ourselves or to deal with the conflict, then that's really not the best way to use your emotional resources. And the third thing, and this is a big one, is that conflict, when not addressed effectively and resolved, has a way of poisoning everything else. So that when you're mad at somebody, they can't do anything right. Even though that's not the truth, but you just can't see the good. Now, the point here might not be as obvious, and that is that there's a positive side of conflict. And it's important to understand the positive side of conflict because it will help you to use conflict to actually grow and progress. The first positive aspect of conflict is that they identify potential areas of growth. You know, you feel that everything is fine, everything is all right, because there is no conflict, because people are in a denial or an avoidance mode. But where there's conflict, you're able to see areas where you can potentially grow. The second thing about conflict is that they identify areas of passion. You know, people don't get in fights about things that they are not passionate about. The problem is that passion turns into something negative and destructive, but it does give you an opportunity to actually see what is really, really important to the individual or to the community. And then number three, that conflict allows you to be able to come to a deeper understanding of the persons involved. Have you ever noticed that if you can work through some difficulties, that oftentimes you see growth in your relationship with the person? You get a chance to understand them and they understand you better. So how do you then get at resolving these various conflicts? Well, the relational strategy for dealing with conflict is to identify the root cause. As I said before, instead of looking at the act or the actions or even the words that are said, try to get beneath those to identify what is the root cause. Is the root cause a misunderstanding? Is the root cause expectations that weren't met? Was the root cause relational, emotional needs not met? Was the root cause that boundaries were violated? And when you are able to then identify the root cause, then you can help the parties involved to work through their issues through a process of confession and forgiveness. Now, this is an important part of the process, that when there is conflict, most of the time there's going to be a need for some confession. And oftentimes that confession is going to have to take place on both sides. In most conflicts that I have seen or been a part of, there is never one side that is totally, absolutely wrong and the other side totally, absolutely right. So that in confession, you're basically saying the same that God would say about your actions and your participation in this particular conflict. If it was a misunderstanding and you didn't get it clear, then you have to admit and say the same. Sorry, I misunderstood. And I was wrong. Now that's a very key part of it, of a confession, is to be able to take responsibility for what you need to take responsibility for. The second thing is forgiveness. Now, oftentimes there's a need for forgiveness on both parts. That is to say, if both parties are wrong about something and has to confess, then there is something that may have to be forgiven on both sides. It's very important to understand that forgiveness just simply means to let it go. And to let it go means to consciously Let it go. That's what forgiveness literally means: to loose, to send from, to let go, to drop it. And what you will discover is that the power of forgiveness is to the benefit of the person that's doing the forgiving. That is to say that when you let it go, you experience being released from the past. How many of you all know of churches or families or neighbors that have been having issues for years? That the conflict occurred so long ago that no one even remembers why you are feuding in the first place. But you're still living back in the past of what happened 5, 10, 15, 30 years ago. When you let it go, you're able to enter into the presence. The second is that forgiveness empties anger out of your emotional cup, so that the way to identify whether or not you're forgiven is not forgiving someone or forgiving a situation, is not whether or not you remember it or that you still have some pain, but is whether or not you still have anger. And when you've emptied out the anger, you know that you're on the path of healing in terms of forgiveness. And then number 3, that the forgiveness provides the power to minister acceptance to the person that offended you. And it is through confession and forgiveness that the conflict is healed and resolved and not just simply managed. So the next time that you encounter a conflict, the question is, which bucket are you going to throw on it? My prayer is that this video presentation will have provided you some special insights and resources that you'll be able to use to live a full and flourishing life in your church. Thank you.